Now for our program for the evening. Charles Deaton, you said Mr. Deaton brought you here himself? Okay, that's good. So we've got a special program tonight, and it's rather unusual. We're going to have a few folks talk. Mr. Mike Owen here from Historic Denver and Mr. Stevens as well. Essentially, we're going to go through kind of a bigger picture around what is going on with Deaton, who is Deaton in general, and then we'll talk about a little bit as far as the historic status of it, who holds the facade easements, and all those kinds of interesting things. And then we'll look at a wonderful documentary that was put together a few years back. So I think I'm going to hand it over to Adam now to introduce us to who you know personally, Mr. Charles Deaton.
I don't know Charles Deaton personally, unfortunately. Sorry, I'm just looking here to make sure the slides are up on the Zoom. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to tell you about what little I know about Charles Deaton and share some slides, some photos that I've taken of his buildings, well, one particular building, and just give you kind of a general overview of Charles Deaton. Charles Deaton is not a Colorado native. He was born in, and I'm going to have to refer to my notes. All right, he was born on January 5th, 1921 in Clayton, New Mexico. His mom was an artist and his dad was a geologist working for the oil industry. Interesting combination. When he was a kid, they moved to Oklahoma. And, of course, during the Depression, things got awful hard, especially for people in the oil industry. And they lived a very poor lifestyle. Deaton claims that they actually lived in a tent on their plot of land in Oklahoma for 2 years before building a one-room house that he grew up in. When Charles Deaton turned 16, he decided to drop out of high school in the interest of becoming a commercial artist. He then and he raised money for his supplies to become a commercial artist by selling newspapers. When he turned 17, he dropped back into high school, realizing that even commercial artists need a high school diploma. He completed high school right about at the end of the Depression and jumped into doing commercial art. But he also, when he was pretty much right out of high school, and this is a photo of Charles Deaton here, he actually developed a board game and had it patented and branded and everything, called Gusher. And you can imagine probably what it covers. So not long after graduating high school, he went to New York to work as a freelancer doing commercial art and whatnot. And while he was there, he saw the New York World's Fair, and that's when he became inspired about architecture. And he actually participated in a program where he studied architecture himself and was basically self-trained in architecture and industrial design. And so when you get into his work, he's an interesting fellow in that he is really a combination of his parents. Highly technical, but also very much an artist. In 1949, he moved to St. Louis, working for the Bank Building and Equipment Company. And during that time, he worked on developing products for the company. He actually even patented some things that he did, including a design for vault door locks and other mechanisms involved with bank vaults. And he designed a couple of buildings in St. Louis as well. And during that time, of course, he was continuing to develop what his philosophies about architecture were going to be, even though he wasn't actively full-time practicing architecture. But I have a quote here about what his belief was for architecture. He says, I have gone to believe that sculptural architecture predates angular and rectilinear architecture by many centuries. Man lived with rolling hills and curvilinear caves, round thatch roofs, and molded mud huts long before Euclid's geometry squared up our cities. We are accustomed to our square cities that fully rounded forms now look new to us again. The question today is not whether sculptural architecture is new, but to ask how far it can grow as a major art form. In Denver, he then, and I don't have any photos of the project, one of his first projects in Denver was to work on Central Bank and Trust downtown in 1959. It was actually a building that, I forget his first name, Benedict, was it Jacques Benedict? Jacques Benedict was working on, and he was working for him, and that was kind of his first experience in doing his organic design. His next building after that in 1964 was in Casper, Wyoming, and I do have photographs of that here. This is a photo that I took several years ago while it was still a Wells Fargo. The signs, the big fork or whatever sticking up out of the top is actually not part of the original design. That was added later. But you can see it's already, he's already doing his organic architecture here. And what's interesting is this is not just applied ornamentation on a building. These these site cast concrete panels, which were actually, they were poured on the ground and then lifted up into place. I believe there's 17 panels in total creating this dome structure, are structural themselves. They are creating the building. And inside of this dome is actually a columnless space. And so these are the structure. You're seeing the structure exposed on the outside of the building. This is very sophisticated for somebody who has no architectural training. Here's a photograph of it. Not brand new, because you can see the signpost there, but some time ago. And so the building is really a combination of this dome structure and then a more rectilinear structure around it. The rectilinear structure uses precast panels that were manufactured elsewhere and shipped in, but this part was all cast on site. And here's just a news piece about it. And a difficult to see photo of the interior. And I like the stippled drawing because it gives you a good idea of really what the building is about. People in Casper called this the orange peel, which I would agree. And here's an ad for Idealite concrete, a special lightweight concrete that was used on the building. And of course, the company that makes it had to feature it, do an advertisement about it. Utilize lightweight concrete in the large leaf-like blades that form the building's distinctive domed rotunda. The 20-ton blades were created as a work of sculpture and to furnish the required floor space. Each blade is a part of the wall as well as the supporting column. This makes possible a circular room 86 feet in diameter, entirely free of interior supporting columns. And then blah, blah, blah. If you use us, hire us. Here's some of the drawings for its construction. This is kind of showing the window detailings. So windows were put, of course, between these precast concrete. And of course, all of these window pans would have had to be custom. And just zooming in on it a little bit there. And this is what it looks like today. It's no longer a bank. It is now an event center and like co-working office place that they just call the M. But you can see that they're actually using this wonderful space still today now as an event center. And it looks pretty cool, actually. And then, of course, there's Deaton's house. This was in 1966. I'm not going to go into great depth on his house because I'll let a friend from Historic Denver talk more about it. But Deaton was not working in the shadows doing amazing things. He was clearly a great promoter because all of his projects were very well covered in the news. Thank goodness. Makes it easy to get information about his works. But this is the cover of Denver Post's Empire magazine, where his home actually landed on the cover in 1966 when it was quote unquote complete, although the house was never really complete in his lifetime. And then it had a huge, three 2-page spreads about it. And so you might wonder, like, wow, this guy designs one bank and suddenly he's building this wonderful $100,000 house on the side of a building. Where is he getting all of his money? Because it certainly wasn't from architecture. So during his career, particularly working for the bank supply company, he was developing all sorts of inventions. He was constantly coming up with new ideas. He designed furniture. He designed lighting systems. He designed all sorts of stuff for bank vaults. And in fact, around the time that his house was built, there were companies already supplying, or I should say selling, over 100 products that he designed under license by him. And that was actually making him very wealthy. That, of course, allowed him to do what a lot of architects wish they could do and not have to worry about profit while they're designing, because he already had profit coming in other ways. So here's a couple ads for, on the left is a furniture system that he designed. On the right is a lighting baffle that he designed. Very creative guy. And then, of course, there's this building, which many of you may know as the bank that's over at Hamden and Broadway in Inglewood. Recently, a few years ago, added to the National Register of Historic Places, which is wonderful. And this is, of course, another concrete ad bragging about one of his buildings. This is a model. The model is an important part of his buildings. Now, this is the day before they had all the magical technologies that we have today, where things can be designed in 3D and have all that 3D technology spit out drawings and things. There was no practical way that Deaton could create drawings for this building. So the ask of the contractor was to take the model, measure off of it, and basically replicate the model in full size. And so this was the model the contractor would have been using to build the building. There's another shot of the model there. And this is difficult to see photograph, but this is the building under construction. Of course, inside all of that concrete is steel rebar. So the concrete sculpture you see today, below it has a steel sculpture reinforcing the concrete. And of course, Idealite had to jump in with an ad of their own. The new Key Savings and Loan Association building in Inglewood is an outstanding example of the latitudes available to the architect for the expression of functional beauty through unique design using Idealite, lightweight concrete. Because Idealite weighs up to 30% less than regular concrete, the design proved extremely feasible. First, the foundation could be reduced in size because of a lessened dead load, which produced savings in foundation costs, and Idealite helped reduce bending moments of the mezzanine, an important requirement due to limited availability of support column locations. And Idealite met the job requirements for both strength and superior insulating qualities, very important considerations for this particular job. So these photographs I took several years ago. The building actually looks much cleaner today than it looks in these photographs. And you can see this building's really become a kind of an icon in Inglewood. It would be a shame if Inglewood suddenly decided, oh, hey, it'd be better to have an apartment building there. That this is a mural on the side of the Gothic Theater that depicts the Key Savings and Loan building. And there's a little photograph I took myself. Is it from the future? Are we on a different planet? No, it's just a Charles Deaton building. But I like this photograph because it juxtaposes what he was kind of rejecting. The idea of perfectly boxy, square, 90-degree angles. This is one of his drawings for the building, one of the few drawings, because of course everything was coming off the model. But this is a wild building to photograph because everywhere you turn is a new and interesting composition. And since this is a bank building, I highly recommend going inside. There's the main lobby here. And the mezzanine you can see on the right side, that's the mezzanine that was being referred to in the ad. These light fixtures are original to the building, as are this light fixture here. That's also an original light fixture. And it's mirrored on the other side over the stairs. This is a conference room. This is when you see it from Hamden and you see that big oval window. This is the top portion of that oval window. It's actually a conference room. You can see the ceilings are vaulted, so the structure is expressed inside the building, and the walls between the suites don't go all the way up, so they actually have these clear story windows between the suites on the mezzanine. Is it? What's the setback?
From the property. That's how it's shell. It's on the side.
Oh, where the window is. So Josh mentioned that where the window is right where the property line is. So the window is sitting right on the property line. There are also over these suites, because there's kind of little suites that are up on the mezzanine. It was probably originally bank offices, but now it's actually leased out to small tenants. And those suites have these clear story windows that are actually on the inside of the kind of U shape that the building has, bringing in natural light. This is one of the lower level offices. You can see there's interesting sculpture going on the inside too on the lower level. And so even, if we zoom in on this corner, this is what it looks like here. One of the original light fixtures. Original drive-up teller window. And this is that window where we saw that lower office, that little corner. This is in that window here. And this window faces Broadway. And even windows underneath the building, letting light into the basement. And there's Josh. I always try to get a great photo of Josh when we're visiting buildings. So then there was another part of Deaton's career aside from him designing banks, and that was that he also designed a couple of sports stadiums, a couple of well-known sports stadiums. If you're familiar with, I don't know if they've won anything big lately, but the Kansas City Chiefs, they play at Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City, of course, and their stadium was designed by Charles Deaton. It is actually a 2-stadium complex. The other stadium in the complex is the baseball stadium where the Kansas City Royals play, and he also designed the baseball stadium. The original concept for this complex, which was built in 1974, was to actually have this big moving roof that it could be moved over one facility or the other. They actually even worked out the concept of how it was going to happen. He worked with an engineering firm to figure it out. And these two roof panels were actually going to ride on a thin layer of water. So they were actually going to float on water and be able to be pushed from one building to the other. Unfortunately, the roof got value engineered out. But this is the baseball stadium here where the Royals play. And and this is the football stadium. This is Arrowhead Stadium. And you can definitely see Deaton in these designs. I think this is the first game that they played in the stadium here. And here's the complex together, the two buildings together, without the roof. Unfortunately, so Deaton hired an architecture firm, a local firm, to help him. I don't know if I really want to remember their name, but I did write it down here somewhere. Kevin and Myers. And unfortunately, when these facilities were completed, they were absolutely cutting edge. Nobody had ever seen stadiums like this. I sound like Donald Trump when I say something like that. But they completely changed the design of sports stadiums. Every stadium that was built after these stadiums was influenced by the design of these stadiums. And so, really, Charles Deaton was the father of the modern football and baseball stadium. And unfortunately, the firm that he hired to help him ultimately ended up stealing credit from him. And they went off and they sold stadiums across the country. In fact, Kansas City, for many years, I don't know if it still is, has been a hub of stadium design. In fact, almost every major stadium has come out of Kansas City since these facilities were built. And that was because of how innovative these facilities were. But unfortunately, it should have been Deaton getting all of that work, not the firm that he hired to help him. He actually sued the firm to try to correct the record and spent 10 years and an insane amount of money fighting them. And ultimately, I don't think he got a satisfactory conclusion on that. But I have some quotes here that I'm just going to read instead of trying to summarize them. These are Deaton's own words about what he did with these stadiums. And I'm blind now, so I'm going to take my glasses off. So Deaton says, as far as designing these stadiums, he says, so what he did is he actually, when he realized that he was in the running to design a stadium, he had actually been playing around, in his free time with stadium designs. He had this notion that he could design a stadium, and he was preparing to sell Denver a pair of stadiums. And Denver was doing I forget what they call it when they ask the taxpayers for dollars to pay for a stadium. But basically the vote failed on that, and he was not going to end up designing any stadiums in Denver. But he had a friend, and there's nothing that says how he met him, but he met this guy named Lamar Hunt. You may have heard of him. He kind of founded the NFL, and he was the owner of the Kansas City Chiefs, and he really, really liked Deaton's work. So much so that he told Deaton, hey, we've got a new stadium project coming up in Kansas City. You should go talk to Kansas City. And so Deaton took all the ideas that he had and presented them to Kansas City and got himself hired in the late 1960s. So he traveled around the country then trying to understand what's working and what's not working at stadiums. And Deaton readily admits that before doing this, he had never actually watched a football game or a baseball game. And he said even when he went to go see the games at these stadiums, he didn't think he had actually watched any of the games because he was so busy paying attention to the stadium. So these were his observations of what drove his design. He says, one thing that hit me was that baseball parks were a terrible place to drink beer. I was determined that I would make Kansas City Stadium a comfortable place to drink beer and eat hot dogs. So I began talking to concessionaires and engineers and many people. It's much easier to watch a sports event on television. You get up close. So why go to the stadium? I theorized that people want to be part of a social event. They want to be in a throng. They want to see other people and be seen. So instead of a straight section, I felt it was important to bow the stands. With the stands straight, the person can only see those on the other side of them. With the stands bowed, he can see thousands of other people. He has a sense of longing. I also thought about convenience. A sports fan doesn't want hassle. He wants to be able to drive to the game, get a place to park, and find a seat with a minimum of problems. Some of the stadiums I visited created havoc for the fans. By the time they got to their seats, they were uptight and mad. The game itself is supposed to affect the emotions, not the getting to the game. So I wanted to make it easy on the fans. Lots of parking, feeder rows, wide concourses, bathrooms close to everyone, concession stands that were accessible and a casual feeling, not a rushed feeling. I think we accomplished that in Kansas City. After the game, there isn't a mad rush. People know they can take their time and get out quickly and easily. We brought more people to the sides where they should be, and a player must feel like the people the player must feel like the people are on top of them. We were able to bring them in close. And it has notes here in this article that says, it's a 78,000 seat theater, or 78,000 seat stadium, and 75% of the seats are along the sidelines. And as far as the baseball stadium, he says, in so many stadiums, some spectators are facing the outfield. Others are looking at home plate. Still more are focusing on first base or the scoreboard. I found out that 90% of the action in baseball happens in the area between the pitcher's mound and home plate. So people should be looking there. I took a spot halfway between those two, and that was my focal point. I decided to arc the stadium from that point and allow everyone to be able to focus there. We put the majority of the seats in an area that was closest to that focal point. He says, I believe stadiums should be built for the fans, not for the contractors. In the past, most stadiums were built to make it easier for the contractors, and the fans suffered. We didn't do that in Kansas City. So when you look at these facilities, you're thinking to yourself, yeah, it's Deaton, he's doing curves and blah, blah, blah. But actually, he had a lot of thoughtful ideas going into the design of these buildings. And Lamar Hunt said that he was quoted as saying, this is the most pleasing architectural design as well as the most practical facility ever built for football. Charles Deaton, designer of the facility, is a most creative architect, which is a pretty good compliment to get from your client. So the reason I spent so much time on that is that it's really part of an untold story. A lot of people have no idea that Charles Deaton was involved in these buildings, that Charles Deaton really was the great innovator that brought us the modern stadiums that we have today. And it's kind of ironic, Deaton, for years, starting with these facilities, but he didn't stop there, was finding a way to put roofs on stadiums. And now, suddenly, the Broncos are talking about putting a roof on their stadium. So here are some designs that he was thinking. In the 1980s, Denver was thinking about putting a roof on stadiums, and Deaton had some ideas. None of them were adopted, but he was thinking about these things probably for the rest of his life. This is another just little offshoot project that I'm wrapping up with. This project was never actually done. This is Alcatraz Island. For whatever reason, Lamar Hunt, of course, the owner of the Chiefs, he was going to somehow redevelop Alcatraz, and part of that included an Apollo 11 memorial on the site. And this was Deaton's design for it, but it was never built, unfortunately. But all of this kind of just high-level overview of Deaton's career should show you that he really was a magical combination of his parents. He was both an artist and an engineer, and he was full of ideas through his entire life. And it's kind of a shame that we didn't see more work out of him through his lifetime. I think he probably would have designed many, many more stadiums had his architects not steal the credit from him. But I think I will be shouting from the rooftops as long as I can about him being the true innovator in stadium design. Unfortunately, the Chiefs and the Royals are talking about maybe leaving their facilities. But I think it is telling that they are still using their facilities here 50 years later. So there you go. That's my part. I'm going to pass the baton here.
I have a question.
Mhm.
So to my knowledge, Arrowhead Stadium is famous, or it's some maybe infamous for being the loudest NFL.
It is. It does have that notoriety of being the loudest NFL stadium.
So I'm wondering if he was so kind of ignorant to the sport, was that intentional or unintentional consequence?
I'm guessing it was a happy accident. But I don't know the answer to that question. And I'll... Not in any way that it was satisfactory that, like, at that point the damage had been done. Like, all the companies or all the other cities and sports owners that would have hired him ended up hiring the Kansas City firms that had originally worked for him, and not him, unfortunately. He did try bidding for other projects. He tried to offer the Cubs a new stadium design, which was probably never going to happen, and proposed other stadium designs around the country, but none of them were ever taken up, unfortunately. But there are other stadium designs that he did kind of in high-level concept for other cities. They just were never built. All right. Do you want to introduce our next...
Mr. Owen, you can introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. So my name is Mike Owen. I work for Historic Denver. I think that perhaps many of us associate it with the Molly Brown House Museum. Historic Denver, we were founded in 1970 to save Margaret Brown's house. Since then, we've really expanded into a lot of advocacy and preservation programs. And the 1980s, not too well-known program, our easement program. So we actually hold a preservation easement on Charles Deaton's sculpted house on Genesee Mountain, which we're very lucky to have. It's one of our most unusual easements, one of my personal favorites. And when we think about preservation, we have state and national register, although those are largely honorific, and the sites are still threatened by demolition. And it's up at the top of a mountain, so it's not like Denver Landmarks could save and protect this building. So how do you save it? And in 2004, it got on the National Register, and the owners at that time placed a preservation easement on it. So we are sort of an independent, a not-for-profit, and we are like Landmarks. I approve all the exterior changes, and we save it from being demolished. Also, fun fact, and I'm possibly dating myself here, if you've ever seen Woody Allen's film Sleeper, it's also aka the Sleeper House, the house of the future. It is an incredible structure. It is in private residence. We do have VIP member tours periodically of our easements that are privately owned, so similar to Doors Open Denver, where occasionally we get to go inside. So Historic Denver, we're always working for that, to gain access to these incredible sites. And you can actually see it on 70 driving up. I mean, don't get into an accident, but it's up on the hill on the top left. And this sort of expressionist style, very unique, it was already discussed. He would often, create like a sculpture first and then figure out how to do it. Very unusual architecture. And we're very excited about another Charles Hartling, and St. Stephen's Church in North Glen, another incredible neo-expressionist gem that we will be holding an easement on too. So we're just very proud to be here, and I'll be here after the presentation if you have follow-up questions on the sculpted house, on the sleeper house. But we're just very pleased to be here, and thank you so much for the invite just to join and say a few words. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mike. Do we have the film queued up? Kind of.
I think let's open it up for comments, and maybe we can have our two speakers come back up and field any questions. Yes, sir.
This structure house reminds me of the Bob Hope House at Palm Springs, which was designed by John Lauder. I'm wondering if the two architects knew each other or one was in.
I don't know, John Lauder. I do know Hartman one that they knew each other, and that's Northfield expressionist, but I'm not sure about that. I can try to remember. What's that name? We should look up it. Yeah. Look up it. That is it.
Lauper has some in the aspect too. I think you're the one new properties in aspect. I would assume most of us have seen the Dave Lebowski. The Goldstein house that's in there, that's what this is. So you definitely know to you again. I kind of think Captain, everyone knows it's a new week in there, but yeah, I mean, you see it.
I would be surprised if they would have been contemporaries and reading about each other and both being highly published. So
I was just going to ask you, can we just see this movie, whenever we want, or do you have to pay for it, or where?
I have it on the sure. Okay.
Yep, got VHX.
Design Mile High on Garrison.
Oh, who designed Mile High Church on Garrison and Alameda? Fentress. Well, and Fentress says that they designed it? The original building, not the addition. Yes. The original building is done by your architect, Tom Height, a multifamily apartment designer. Did that building. A bunch of cast in place concrete high-rise towers in the 60s, and that's pretty much it. He lived in a little Leave It to Beaver over in Westminster.
They also could, what's the other one in Cheese then? Lafayette Tower, the one that when it was
Lafayette.
And then at Cap Hill, there's a sister to Parkway Tower, and it's still cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Lafayette Towers is a Tom Height. Yes.
Dad might not know the answer, which is totally fine. But if he's buying stuff from a sculpture, how is he accounting for the logistics of structurals, impacts, wind resistance? Like, how is he accounting for that, giving it a terrain for?
So I know that all of it had to be custom, and that's what led to the cost. And I know that there were some engineers there's more history I've come across. Oh, sorry. Not to talk about a different Charles, but just the other expressionist, the St. Stephen's, there was I have the name, Swedish engineer had to come in and specially design each piece. I haven't come across specifically in engineering with Charles Deaton, but I think that's what it kind of speaks to. I think that he almost was able to calculate it himself and then just kind of get the contractors to do it. And it's sort of, survived the test of time. It's a proven to how long it's lasted. We're just very lucky at 30 years it was vacant and it's still here. But I haven't actually come across a specific answer to that.
I don't know about the house. All of his other projects did happen here. I know the stadium to Kansas City, Milo Ketchum was also into Artisan Ball. I can't remember the name of the firm that was on the bank in Englewood doing the air ball set for the local engineer.
Part of that process is that as you scale it up and establish the dimensions for the full scale, then you understand what you're going to do structurally, and then you engage with an engineer and work out whatever structural system is going to make sense for those dimensions in that form.
Projects, for the most part, they are really very tight detail. You might make up the story that, it's sort of this artistic sculptural wookie-doo bag, and the details might not be there. They're pretty tightness.
How much did it cost ultimately?
Jeter's initially go there and
So the sculpted house at the time, it was $100,000, and I think it was like basically $1 million, of today's money, and it kind of bankrupted him, like it said. But I think there was one quick slide in that it was most houses were about 10 grand or so, and this was, $100,000. It was very high cost for that time, and like I said, everything was custom.
I noticed one of the interesting things about some artists who worked at Kala, Charles Deaton, Richard Crowther, came out of the sort of andragogy in architecture, where neither of them ever actually had an architecture degree.
Andragogy. That's a good word.
Pedagogy, pedagogy, learning on the job, right? Would they have faced scariest actually be projects because they were not, they didn't come out at the sort of in the traditional schooling that was expected of professionals in the field.
It's a good question. I'm not quite sure.
Oh, really? What? Mr. Das was actually there. At the time, you think back to the majority of the master architects. They didn't go to school and they didn't get their license for a very long time. This is kind of the period where all of a sudden we need to get a license. And, things around, to my knowledge, Deaton's office was never more than Deaton. Can you imagine one guy getting a massive stadium project?
Yeah.
It's insane. I would say that's why is,
The designer and not the architect of record. Yeah, my knowledge.
Again with the sleek or the sculpture now. I live in the foothills and I know the problems with the clay soil. And I did a lot of the Citrus modern home in the foothills. And I've noticed like major structural issue in those homes. And I wonder, has anybody been in the sleeper house and seen any type of structural, issues because of clay soil or anything? Or was that considered at the 60s? Because it doesn't seem like it was in terms of houses that I visit. Crap. Like a picture pre-finishing the home. And I'm not sure if that was like because of, structural issue. It is something that I wonder about.
From our records, I haven't seen that many. They're not technically permits, but they're basically permits related to the structure. And when I was out there, we didn't really notice anything. And I think under Huggins, when he took over that's when it really was like a shell and did all their work. So they may have encountered more structural challenges. But and everything I've come across in our files, but I've only been there for years. And John Olson, who was speaking on the video, he was sort of my predecessor at Historic Denver. I haven't seen that many structural related notes, and I do have those notes with some of our other easements. I don't know if
The only insight
Adam
I provided is that in that interview that we saw where he was being interviewed on television, he did say that it was anchored to the rock that it torn. So that may have had a profound effect on its stability.
I also find in showing houses specifically kind of obviously there's not anything super, super close to that house. But like I show a lot of houses in Genesee and overall I would say actually I very rarely see issues, whereas like Green Mountain, ooh, that's a hot mess. Like there's definitely pockets where like Ken Carl is terrible for it. Green Mountain terrible for it. But I cut up like as soon as you start to like depart up like on Lookout Mountain, across the way over in Genesee, I don't see that many houses where I'm like, oh, but I think it's because a lot of it is granite. They're on a water like actual stone, which is going to be different than like right on the very edge of the foothills. And I think that's why like as you go in that Littleton Basin, why there's so much clay, it almost is like a wash off from the mountains. I don't know. You have to go way far back, but that's my experience selling houses and walking in so many houses that like Genesee isn't somewhere where I go, there's could be structural issues. Green Mountain, yes. Yes, I would go lost.
I'm an ape and I just eat a tonic home.
Yeah.
And it had somebody. She's like on there, but that night.
It also has a lot of underground water. So specifically on Altair right there's several streams. I saw a house where like I can like literally I was drawing up a concrete basement that was like crumbling from water in a house on Altair. So I mean like there is underground water in Applewood for sure in a lot of areas, and I think that also contributes to like why Applewood has like some houses are super solid and some that have a lot of movement.
Other thoughts?
Is there a chance to ever go in it? I mean, it's
So I alluded to that a little bit, similar to Doors Open Denver. Shameless plug for being a VIP Historic Denver member. You get access to every month a different easement property. We have actually 2 tomorrow. If you want to come to one of those, see me afterwards. We do work with private owners that are not normally open to the public, and we have spoken to the current owners. I think that they periodically do stuff like this. So it's always a delicate relationship because they're not required to. That's not like a requirement of the easement. It's state historical fund money is public money. That's sort of separate from us. This is a private residence, but quite a few of our easement buildings are open to the public, and we're always, laying the seed for that for a future tour. So stay tuned. I guess I'll end it on that.
Question. She's not going to answer it because she's zipping investigating. Is there a correlation between the jet and cam?
Do you believe that after Riddles will the Jetson?
It does look like the Jetson.
In the 60s, and I was wondering, did the cartoonist copy his, or did you get a little bit by watching the Jordan?
Oh, good question.
We'll have to read the.
On YouTube today, know it.
You did Jensen start? I think he's 62.
No, meet George Jetson, right? Yep.
Building in LA that I wrote that was probably
Until it's come out of that, I keep thinking about that. I
Bought your car shop.
Yeah, and then the cookie dough then Jimmy know about. But I think like the scene building, like doing in the scene building and seeing some of the details, I bet you if Deaton had a chance to, and I bet that it fires a staircase in was built to the house.
Aerosemin's terminal.
That's true. And also, yeah, the term up to yeah.
Oh,
Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, you're at your hand up first, sir. I just want to say I got to go in sometime in the, late 80s, early 90s when it was a wreck. There was a caretaker that my mom knew, and it was very clandestine. We had to go to a gas station and call for the instructions on how to exit her. But the septic system was shot. It was very rough inside. There were boxes with custom milled faucet gimbals. We just kind of an oval shape. The railing, I'm not an architect, but it actually goes from kind of short to long. The short, there's some reasoning behind that. I believe that where the dining room is, the glass would rotate, so it go from outside to inside. Oh wow! And then I got to go back in like 2002 when it was done. Higgins was he worked for Hickenlooper, and he got his money in tactic, basically up in nonprofits for all of them back then. No.
Thank you for sharing.
Also heard that maybe he was out of staying away because of a divorce situation. Not sure. I don't know. Yeah, no.
Anything else? Any other thoughts? All right. Well, thank you, host.
We've got an announcement.
Oh, big announcement. Before you guys leave, we have snacks back by the bar if anyone wants to get snacks before you guys hit the road.
Yeah, and more importantly, stand up. A big thank you to ModMood for hosting us. Hello. You gotta thank our lovely hosts. If you thought this was a great program, it was free. We do take donations. And if you want to take the sculpture house home, you could get a postcard, but it needs a donation.